Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter. I'm Jono Logan, and I am coming to you live, not really, from beautiful New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. I am here visiting my parents, and I've been here for 2.5 weeks. It has been wonderful. So if you're wondering why I sound a little bit different, it's because I'm using my travel mic right now instead of my big mic arm mic that makes me sound good. So this one's just a little tiny blue snowflake mic, and I love it. But if you wonder why, that's the reason. So I've been spending the last 2.5 weeks. I've been organizing my old Lego. I had like 3 giant tins of Lego in my little storage cupboard from when I was a kid. So I took them and I dumped them all out on the floor. And I've been trying to build as many sets as I can using them. And it's been slow going because I've lost some pieces over the last 3 decades. So that's been fun. And I've been visiting my parents' cottage, and I've been watching just tons and tons of documentaries. I just finished The Imagineering Story. It was on Disney Plus, and it is, if you are a fan of Disney theme parks, or like if you like theme park YouTube, that kind of thing, it's a pretty awesome 6-part miniseries about Imagineering, and I recommend it highly. So let's just jump in here, and I just want to introduce all of our guests, and they all have games on their mind this week. So first up is an RPG fan podcasting legend, Alana. Alana, how are you doing?
A podcasting legend? Come on, like that's not even the first thing I do here, but I appreciate it. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I am fine. I am currently in the spare bedroom in my house because it is the only place that has me isolated from my parents where I can record, and it is very hot.
Yep. All my windows are shut. I live on a main road, so I completely get you. And it's pretty warm here for England. It's like 21 Celsius for 8 o'clock in the evening. That's fairly warm.
That is fairly warm. It's pretty warm here. It's 26, but it is also, because we're on the water, it is incredibly humid.
Yep.
So it's like, even if it's like 18 degrees, you're still sweating because it's like you're walking through, you're trying to walk through the air. Like you need to put effort into it.
Oh yeah, I know that. I live near the beach, so yeah, completely understand.
Yeah, the climate where you are and the climate where I am, Nova Scotia. I mean, when the Scots and the English arrived in Nova Scotia, they were like, "Hey, this is just like home. This
feels
is great.
Familiar? Yeah, let's colonize it or something. Like that sounds like everything we've ever done." So yeah.
Okay. Up next, so we have our returning champion for this week from our Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, Audra. Hello there. How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing good.
You have just been racking up the reviews the last few weeks. You and Bob are just killing it lately with just like churning them out.
He's probably going to defeat me.
Well, I'm just going to have to assign you some more games then. And we're not going to talk about it today, but you just posted a Chrono Trigger retro review.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about it here because it turns out that A, we're not Retro Encounter, and B, I think everyone's talked about Chrono Trigger enough well, that's not true. I could talk about Chrono Trigger forever. But did you like it?
Yes, I did.
I thought you might. Yeah, and so yeah, we're going to talk about a few reviews from you. And finally, we have the person who can see 1 week in the future to tell us all the new games that are coming our way, Quinton O'Connor.
Hi. Yeah, I got to say I'm honored to be on this podcast with a couple of podcast legends who are also incredibly warm and an RPG fan review finalist in Audra. I'm just here telling the future. I don't really have anything like that going for me, but I'll do my best. I hope everyone's good.
Of course you have something going for you, because you just published a review for a game that a lot of people were both eagerly awaiting and silently dreading.
Yes.
Yeah, so why don't we just jump right in? I want to talk about Zelda Skyward Sword. Quinton has just published a review for it. And Quinton, you actually rather enjoyed the game. In fact, you gave it an 85, which some people would dispute and some people would celebrate, and some people would say that you're a sellout. Where would you come down on that? Look, this game is controversial, okay? Quinton, you could have given it 185 or like a 50, and there would still be people angry at you for it.
Sounds like Zelda fans.
Yeah. No. I gotta say, let me just lead in by saying, I remember when the game first came out, and the critical scores are like infamously as high as most other Zeldas, and so it was just like riding on the waves of hype that every other console Zelda has always gotten. And then I was on like Game FAQs. I know, terrible decision, but I was on there regularly at the time, and I started noticing these topics that were popping up that were people complaining about the game. And at first I was like, it's Game FAQs. Everybody complains about everything. But they just didn't go away. And then I got my hands on the game a few days later, and I was like, oh no, some of them are valid.
Oh no.
Not necessarily all of them, but quite a few of them. Oh no.
I like the idea that Game FAQs was like the Rotten Tomatoes before there was Rotten Tomatoes.
It was. And the freaky thing is you can go back into the archives for a lot of these, and now you'll see like a timestamp that's just like 16 years ago, and it's just like, oh wow, what are these people doing today? I hope they're all well.
The internet didn't exist 16 years ago. What are you talking about?
But anyway, Skyward Sword. So I went into it the first time, all those years ago, and I had, an opinion of it like everyone else did. My opinion of the HD remaster is in many ways similar, but in some ways improved. And then in one little way, which I didn't see coming, but, hey, it happens. Maybe diminished just a little bit.
Diminished cap?
Diminished
Ooh.
cap. Oh, no.
That's
Oh, no,
good.
I'm sorry.
No, that's a good one.
If we're going to sit here all doing that, then this is going to be a long podcast, and I'm going to need a lot of time to think of something because I'm tired.
For everyone who doesn't know, because why would you? Because you're not in the RPG fan staff forum, Quinton got lost in the woods.
Oh, yeah, I got lost in the woods. That was, that only enhanced the Skyward Sword reviewing experience. I think it was a lot like, jumping onto your loft wing and getting lost down below. Actually, it was nothing like that whatsoever, but, I'm trying.
Quinton fell off his loft wing and he was lost in the woods for a while. But don't worry, it was a very linear woods, so...
Oh, no. We're just going to jump right into that, are we? Yeah, so Skyward Sword, for the uninitiated, I'm going to be careful about spoilers and all that fun stuff, is a mostly linear game in the sense that, there are many games that are technically more linear than it, but when you go into a Zelda, I think many people who have played other Zelda games are experiencing this sort of almost open world before open world was a term with a lot of them. I remember infamously Skyward Sword launched, I think, the same month as Skyrim, and that was just like, Skyrim is like celebrating that sort of thing, love it or hate it, to the max with its greats and its lows and all that. And Skyward Sword, meanwhile, was like Nintendo saying, let's make a more just progressive game where everything's more sort of sequestered and chopped off from each other. And, it doesn't feel like that in the beginning. I think you kind of start off and you're thinking, okay, well, this is like, the island that Toon Link was on. This is the village that Twilight Princess Link is, stuck in for a while and all that. And then there's this very enticing concept, which is that there's a world below and you have this lovable bird and you're going to go down there and it's Hyrule, yay, it's Hyrule. But then you kind of quickly discover that you're going through it kind of one section at a time in a way that it feels more restrictive than any of the Hyrules before it, I think. Well, maybe there's a 2D one that I'm not thinking of. But, definitely the 3D ones. And that's still the case. Nobody was expecting this massive, let's turn this into, like, Skyward of the Wild or whatever. But, I think it feels a little bit more restrictive in 2021 just because of how gaming is developed. But yeah, I still really like the game overall. I think it has the strongest story. I think part of the boon, I guess, of how linear it was is that there was also this sentiment of, like, alongside the linearity, let's do more cutscenes than usual. Let's kind of go that route. And the characters, the main characters, are just so endearing to me. Link himself has quite a personality. I think the only personality maybe that kind of trumps that is Toon Link's, but that's just because he's so expressive that you can't help but laugh or cry for him when he makes the upside, happy face or the smirk or all that. But in terms of, like, I guess a realistic character, Skyward Sword's Link just has so much going on. You can really feel his connection to Zelda throughout the game. Zelda herself, she gets, trapped in lots of things like usual, but
I thought you said no spoilers. Hey.
Oh, no. Well, she gets trapped in a metaphorical sense, and then we'll stop right there. Okay, let me... All right, minor, tiny spoil in the beginning. Sorry about that, guys. Believe it or not, you don't play as Zelda. But,
oh, wow.
She still has more agency, I think, in the way she's depicted than in a lot of the other ones. And then there's Groose, who is this redhead pompadour. He's very proud of his pompadour guy who has his two sidekicks of, absurd proportions and that sort of thing. And he's introduced as your rival, but he has that whimsical, remember at all times this is a Nintendo game, so we're kind of over the top, almost Studio Ghibli kind of thing going on, but in a wonderful way, you know, as Studio Ghibli tends to be. And he has an arc, like a real arc, and you know, seeing that develop through the game is great. So we'll say characters and story, yay. The linearity. This is, I think I called it like the irony of ironies in the review. This is where things get kind of tricky and murky and difficult to kind of qualify, because the game is just jam-packed with content, technically. Every region is like bursting with stuff to interact with, you know, just like, I think one of its greatest strengths, but then again, perhaps its greatest weakness most of the time, is that getting to a dungeon feels like almost a dungeon in of itself. There are puzzles here, puzzles there, puzzles all over the place. But I think for me, and probably for a lot of people, given how divisive this game is, it just gets exhausting after a point. And part of that, a big part of that, is because you're going to be going through these things a lot, you know, and that's just like the spoiler-free statement, is just expect to see a lot of the same things oftentimes, and then to go through and be like, welcome back, time to do more stuff here. And it just wears thin. I think it really wears thin. And there's a lot of just fetch questiness. And I think that's kind of like the buzz term that's always been applied to it in a point, is as strong as the story is, the execution of it is very go here and get thing. And you could argue that that's kind of like a core to the Zelda series, but it usually feels more enchanting, I guess you could say. You know, I'm talking with a lot of subjective stuff here, but
No, I completely understand. I mean, the fetch quest idea in a lot of the other games was like, go here, get the thing, you get the thing, but on the way back, you're like, ooh, what's that? And you go over this way, and it's an open world versus a linear directed thing. So a fetch quest in a linear directed game is very much a, you go here, you get the thing, and you come right back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like you have a curfew, young man. You better get back to Skyloft by 9 o'clock. What are you doing talking to that tree again? Nothing has changed, I guarantee it. And I think that's where like that sense of wonder and scale really starts to evaporate. And then, of course, you know, the swordplay itself and the overall like motion controls were always this big like epicenter to the game. And
I wanted to ask about that, actually, because one of the big, I guess, changes that Nintendo made to this new remastered version of Skyward Sword is, though the motion controls are still there, there is now a new control scheme that you can use with an actual controller, which is just a mind-blowing innovation.
Yeah.
But which, like, I've read your review, but just for the folks out there, which do you prefer personally? Like, if you had your choice, there's a moblin in front of you, they have a club. Which one? What are you picking up, a controller, or are you picking up a Joy-Con?
I'm probably picking up a real sword if this is happening in real life.
Wow. You didn't count for real moblins, Jono. God.
It's my weakness as a podcast host. I never account for real moblins.
For real. I would pick up the controller. I found that, and this is sort of something I read around that some people didn't really agree with, but to me, occasionally things feel a little awkward and kind of, I don't want to say phoned in, but like as best as they could do. But for the most part, it just felt very smooth to me, and it felt like I was playing any of the other ones. And that kind of comes with an asterisk, and I think that's what makes it interesting to me, is that I feel better than ever playing the game the way it wasn't originally designed around whatsoever. And it's just very interesting. And I remember for years, a lot of folks were like, they're never going to bring the game back because it can't be done with the motion controls, and Nintendo thrives on, you know, making the impossible possible, and I think they did. But there is something to be said, just this weird feeling that came over me, at least the whole time, saying this game turned out to be better than it was before by abandoning its chief concept. And then I also think that the Joy-Cons, honestly, they just feel a lot more intuitive to me and better than the Wiimotes did. Mm-hmm. So you still have this thing where it's like, well, that seems a little better than before, and it's more responsive. And I'm not, you know, infamously in the original, a lot of people kept getting yelled at saying, like, you know, like bring the cursor back to the screen, and it's like, I swear I'm right there. And, you know, So that's a little better, but it just doesn't compete, I think, with the controller. And I think it's great that they included that. I'm definitely happy with the controls. Whereas before, like I've practiced swordplay in real life, so I was like, ooh, this is going to be fun. And it was at points, but then it was just so frustrating in 2011. And I think a lot of us can empathize with that.
For sure, yeah. Like that, you had to. This was the first game that you had to get like the Motion Plus with, wasn't it, on the Wii, right? That came with it, or it was mandatory, wasn't it? Yeah. So it was always like extremely sensitive. Link's arm is always at like a straight 180 degrees angle, and I'm like, no, you've got to like wave the sword around and stuff. So like jump in and ask a question on the controls as well. Like, one of the things I heard, or certainly have been hearing, is that the camera controls in particular on a gamepad are incredibly finicky or incredibly like weird, because I would expect like a joypad or like the right stick or the shoulder buttons to be the main control. Did you have any problems with those? Or
yeah, I think when I was alluding earlier to like a few things feeling like they did the best they could, but it wasn't quite where it needed to be, the camera was pretty much what I was talking about. I remember one of the very, very first things you do in the game is there's a fella, on top of a building, and he says, hey, we should talk, and you should like target me in order to talk. And very simple thing, but because of the way the camera was fidgeting and I wasn't accustomed to it yet, I remember specifically having a problem with that when the game first launched on Wii because of the motion controls. And in this case, it was because I was using a controller, but the camera was just taking so much time to get used to. And then inevitably you start like running away by accident. He's like, hey, it's rude, not to reply to people when they're talking to you. And I'm like, hey, it's rude not to have good camera controls. Like, what do you want me to do?
It's rude. I agree with that.
I'm trying, Nintendo. Jeez.
No, I think, I've certainly read that some people had bigger problems with that than I did. And I don't know if I'm just blessed with having adapted to something worse than I realized, which is certainly possible. I mean, there are things sometimes that no one else complains about with controls in games that I have the worst time ever with. So it's subjective, but I wouldn't say it was great. Everything else about the controls was a winner.
Cool.
How do the new modern controls work exactly? Because I mean, I know that in the, with the Wiimote, which, and you're right, Alana, that was another thing, is the addition of the plus at the bottom. It also made the damn thing way heavier.
Yeah.
It was an awkward solution. But like, how do they simulate the like parrying and attacking the right side? Like, how do they simulate that with the new controller?
So the analog sticks become your best friend very quickly. I don't know. Did any of you ever played like Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance?
Yes.
Okay, it's not extreme like that. They didn't suddenly say like, "Hey, we're gonna get Platinum Games. Expect the Moblins to like come at you with like machine guns and
Your sword would have absolutely no effect if that was the case."
I want Zelda Platinum Games now. Don't do that to me.
Well, I mean, we'll get to that when we get to that. Platinum's constantly like booked with a million things. I'm sure we'll see it by 2045. But it's not like it suddenly goes crazy on you. You're still doing the same movements. But one thing, and you can't see me obviously, but I'm picking up my gamepad, like the Switch Pro controller. That's the term. I'm picking it up and I'm holding it in my hand to kind of like give my brain the right words. And okay, so I think it was Alana, you said a moment ago, like the game would often have you just holding the sword, so to speak, very rigidly, like perfect angles and that sort of thing, where it just didn't feel right. So that to me is resolved with the sticks, because I think there's something more inherent, at least to people who have gamed with controllers, to the idea of I'm slashing to the left, so I'm going to push this stick to the left, and it's not going to feel as weird as if like the game is actually asking you to hold your hand and you realize your arm is doing something that doesn't make much sense. Now, I did try that out with the Joy-Cons as well, of course, and it was a little weirder. And I think, I hate to tell people go out and buy the Switch Pro controller for any particular game, because Nintendo loves to upcharge all its peripherals and that sort of thing. But I would definitely say, if you're going to get Skyward Sword and you're not like chomping, at the bit to try out the motion controls again, get the Switch Pro controller, and then everything feels more fluid.
You could do worse than getting the Switch Pro controller for any system, really.
It's terrific. And I heartily recommend it. I just remember when I bought the Switch. And then I realized, Nintendo done did it again, and here's $64.99 for the controller. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. I play a lot of RPGs. Let's just get this out of the way. Yeah, one thing I do want to talk about is, and I think this is where it shines the best. I find it captivating that the game is better than its original form by removing things, and what it removes is a ton of the tutorials.
Yes, Zelda's version of Clippy.
Yes. It came to us at a time, I think I might have written this in the review, I'm not sure. It came to us at a time when Nintendo was still banking on the idea that there were a ton of people playing their Wii regularly because they were the casual audience that made the Wii sales soar. But I think, as all of us probably know, that audience was fickle, and it left as soon as, other things came out. And so by the end of the Wii's life, and that's why Skyward Sword, at least partly, I think, didn't sell nearly as well as some of the other ones. The only people that were left were like the people who needed that sort of hand-holding the least. So a lot of things, despite how innovative the game was in certain respects, a lot of the time it also kind of came across as, and I hate to say this because there's got to be someone out there who genuinely appreciated all the tutorials. I've just never met them in my life, but it felt like Babby's first Zelda in this, like, every 5 steps, Fi or Fi, however. How do you guys choose to pronounce that, by the way? Let me pause on that. Is it Fi or is it Fi?
I'd say Fi. I don't know.
I'd say Fi as well. I think it's because I read a lot of Shakespeare and have done a lot of Shakespeare. That I think Fi is like no.
Yep. And Fjord as well. Like it fits.
Yeah. I tend to say Fi.
Fi.
I tend to say Fi as well. This was very underwhelming, though, because I know so many people that say Fi. But hi, if you're listening and you say Fi, keep on, shining on. But RPG Fan is apparently 4 on it being Fi, and not for no reason. But yeah, she never stopped talking in the original, and I always had to kind of like defend the fact that I don't hate her as a character, with the caveat that it's like I'm basing it on the few times where she just gets to exhibit her personality in like main story scenes, and she's got that like robotic thing going on that's kind of endearing to me. But no, 90% of the time when she was talking, she was just like, you walk into a dungeon room, and every single dungeon, if you see like the boss room off to the side, she's like, we'll need a boss key for that. Or you go into like certain dungeon rooms and she's just like, Master, here's an idea. And by an idea, I mean, I'm basically telling you what to do. Anyway, I'll be back in 2 seconds because your batteries are a little low. So she doesn't do that anymore. And it's so liberating. But when I think about it, if I'm being technical, the game soars now because they reduced the script. And because she's so much less talkative, and she still says a few things every now and then that came across as obvious to me, but not in the sense where I don't see some people, really relying on her. And then she said some things that I had completely forgotten about, but I actually thanked her once. I think I said out loud to my TV, this sounds weird, but thank you for that, Faye. Yeah, that's the number one improvement they did, was they just made her calm down.
That sounds like a fantastic way to improve the game, because you're right. Like I never hated her, but I certainly was like getting tired of her constant interruptions and things like that. And I actually think you're 100% right. I think that because the Wii was incredibly successful luring in casual gamers, Nintendo went through this phase where they thought they needed to appeal to those players. So they did make a lot of like babies' first games. And sometimes it's just really funny how certain, like the Wii entries of a lot of series, even if they're not like necessarily user friendly, they just miss the mark. Like Other M comes to mind, for example, as another like flagship title that just was a Wii. It should have been a hit, but it just really missed the mark. But then again, the system also has Mario Galaxy, which is the greatest Mario game of all time. So
yeah, I mean, it definitely has some real winners in there. Personally, Twilight Princess is definitely one of my favorite Zeldas. So it came out swinging really, really nicely for me. And then Mario Galaxy. I have a lot of fond memories with Brawl.
It was a great system.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. The staple. Well, we're gonna get one of these entries for several franchises was kind of off. Yeah.
You could argue that was because they kept trying to shoehorn motion controls into the game, but it sounds like they've fixed the two biggest complaints about this game, which was the non-stop tutorials and the motion controls. Well, let me ask you about one or two things that are great about this game. While it's a very linear game and kind of point A to point B, many people, myself included, and yourself included, think that some of the dungeons are the best in the entire series.
I think pound for pound, it may very well have my favorite group of dungeons. The quality goes up and down, but it never dips to the point where I'm just like, this thing is going on too long, or there's not some catchy, innovative concept. Every dungeon has some innovative thing going on, and that expands as the game goes on. I think it might peak somewhere around like, I don't know, the second third of it with certain dungeons. Everybody loves the little like time travel gimmick. Everybody loves other things. I'm not gonna spoil. But yeah, no, they're really well designed. And even though I just complain that Fee, occasionally will just pop in and be like, why don't you move X over to Y? Not literally, but like, even with her doing that, I was in awe, especially, with the increased resolution and that sort of thing. Man, like there are dungeons from each of the other 3D Zeldas. Well, maybe not Breath of the Wild, but that's totally different. Mm-hmm. Each of the other 3D Zeldas that are like among my favorites, but Skyward's just got such a good pack. The puzzles are terrific. You really need to look around, but it never feels like something is like hidden in an absurdist kind of way where it's like, the real solution to this was to swivel your camera around a couple times until you saw something. It all exercises your brain. I think it kind of feels like big versions of some of the best shrines in Breath of the Wild, like the whole way through.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because I, and again, many other people, almost consider Skyward Sword to be a prototype for many of the gameplay mechanics that were eventually perfected in Breath of the Wild. For example, there's the stamina meter, there's climbing, there's things like that. And yeah, there are the somewhat more self-contained levels, which do remind you a little bit of the shrines. What do you think about that? Do you see the direct, I guess, line between these two games?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially in the mechanics that you brought up. There was never a moment while I was running with the stamina meter that I wasn't thinking of like Breath of the Wild and how I feel like they kind of perfected that with that one, but it never felt too clunky with me here. I love just the sheer Zelda flavored absurdity of I've got to run real fast. And if I scoop this fruit up just in the nick of time, I can keep running real fast. I can keep, and scoop this fruit up. That's like vintage Skyward Sword to me.
I would just carry around like peaches with me everywhere I went and just run.
Seriously, just never stop.
I don't need a car. I have a bag of oranges.
The climbing and even the animation, it shows Link kind of like exerting himself and sprawling out in ways that I find like iconic in Breath of the Wild now. But then going back, I'm like, wait, that was Skyward Sword. Obviously, just the one big thing where they differ is just the overworld couldn't be more different if it tried almost. And I think that's why a lot of people basically say, especially people who love Breath of the Wild, and I'm one of them, but I don't say this. I think a lot of people will say, Breath of the Wild is what it is because it's nothing like Skyward Sword. And I'm just like, let's look at like how we celebrate some of the shrine puzzles and go back to Skyward Sword and see some similar gacha and eureka moments. Let's look at how we celebrate the infusion of a few more RPG mechanics and, thank Monolith Soft for a second time because they pitched in with Skyward. And it kind of shows, there are things. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's as in as many ways as they're radically different. Skyward Sword is a prototype.
Yeah. Let's actually open the floor to ask, does anyone have any thoughts about Skyward Sword or memories or any thoughts?
I don't have any more questions. No, I definitely remember playing Skyward Sword when it first came out. And I mean, I'm probably the odd one here in that I don't really like many 3D Zelda games. Like, even Ocarina of Time, I don't totally adore. Twilight Princess, I don't really like. And Breath of the Wild is the only one that I've really gone, oh my God, yeah. And I was really excited when this was announced because, like, I don't really like the motion controls. And I agree with a lot of things you've said, Quinton. Like, the things that stick out to me the most about my original playthrough of Skyward are the dungeon design, because my God, is Ancient Cistern that good? It's so good. And Coloctus, the boss battle at the end of that dungeon in particular, is one that always sticks with me. But it was like the overbearing tutorials, it was the amount of times you had to fight the imprisoned, it was the back and forth, the kind of lack of openness that really kind of put me off a little bit. And like, I already don't like how formulaic Zelda can be sometimes, so forcing me into that linearity, I mean, they were never going to fix that because that's just how it is. It kind of like frustrated me a little bit, so I just lost my way. But like, yeah, the other thing that sticks with me is like the character moments, and like in particular the music. I think Skyward Sword, I love Zelda music, even though I'm not like totally in love with this series. I think Skyward Sword might have the best soundtrack in the entire series. I love the rendition of Zelda's Lullaby, Fee's Farewell, I think it is. There's a couple of other tracks as well.
So good.
Yeah, it's so good. I do want to give Skyward Sword another shot, though, especially with this re-release. I'm not sure when, and I'll definitely try the motion controls as well, because, hey, I live on my own now. Nobody has to see me look like an idiot anymore when I play it, so just me. But yeah, I'm really interested, and your review really is a really balanced review as well, considering that you're like, oh, it's still really great, but look, there are things that it brings in that are good, some things that are bad, and some things that are never going to change, right? Like it's a really important slice of Zelda history, and I'm glad that they've given it a second shot. I think can we get Four Swords Adventure next, or Minish Cap? That would be great. Like or the two Game Boy Color games in like Link's Awakening.
I love
style.
the Game Boy Color ones.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Oh, I love them.
I do too.
Yeah.
Audra, do you have any thoughts?
Actually, just that one day I should play a Zelda game.
Ooh.
I'm one of the few people who hasn't, it seemed like.
Well, I imagine that there are lots of people who have many opinions on which one you should start with.
Yeah, I'd be so hard pressed to just, if you said right now, Audra, and we had to decide right now for whatever reason, which one should I pick up? What's the best one to start with? I could see people saying A Link to the Past. I could see
that's what I would say. Yeah.
Pick.
Yeah. Oh, well then, are we just 3 for 3? What is going on?
We're 3 for 3. Hey, Audra, play Link to the Past.
Link to the Past, or Link's Awakening. I haven't played it myself, and I know it's like it's got a different feel to it. Like it's very unusual for a Zelda game, even a top-down 2D one. But like that Switch remake is, other than the frame drops, is pretty damn good, and it's available. So yeah.
Okay. I'll have to add them to my backlog.
I mean, I can almost hear Solosi right now screaming, Link Between Worlds, but,
Play it after
That's a good one. That's a very good one, yeah.
If you enjoy Link to the Past, then Link Between Worlds is a good follow-up for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you very much, Quinton, for giving us a heads up about what's improved, what hasn't, and why people should give Skyward Sword another shot, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I played it when it was on the Wii. I enjoyed it. I never actually ended up beating it, which is weird because I usually beat if I start a game, I pound my head against it until it's done, but I just didn't with this one. I got to about halfway through and I was like, I'm having a good time. And then I just stopped playing. It just didn't seem to retain me in the same way that the other Zelda games did. So I would very much like to give it another shot.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's Zelda, which is a beloved series with very, very passionate fans. But there is another series with some extremely passionate fans. One of them is on this podcast, and it is called NieR. And NieR has, it has the two big games, but it just released something very interesting, which is a mobile game called NieR Reincarnation, and that is in standard NieR. Why did they do this? It's RE in brackets carnation. I'm sure that has a deeper meaning inside the game, but I just look at it and I'm like, wow, that's NieR for you right there. Alana, you picked up this mobile title and you played it, and you were a massive NieR fan. Honestly, I got to tell you, I don't know that much about the series. I've talked to a few people about it. I've listened to podcasts. I just edited the Rhythm Encounter NieR music episode, so I know for a fact that the music of the games are just unbelievable. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, it comes very highly recommended. And what did you think of this particular title? What did you like about it, and what did you let's say not like about it?
Yeah, it's difficult because first of all, this is a gacha game, so I'm sure everyone was aware of that when it came out. And Yoko Taro, the developer and the chief of the NieR series, for lack of a better term, has even like openly joked about in interviews. He's gone like, "Oh, we're making it like Square Enix wanted it to be a gacha game to tie in with the rest of the series so they can make money out of it." Like, he's very like blasé about it. So if you don't like gacha games, like I don't, and which is why you should probably take any opinions that I have with, well, not with a pinch of salt necessarily, but like, this is someone who doesn't like gacha games, right? And I still don't, even after NieR Reincarnation. Like, it is one of those, like, you pick up, you log in, you've got 50 million things to do, you won't get anything you want, and then you'll do it again tomorrow. You might spend real money and you might not. That's your choice. But like, yeah, it's just one of those things that's really complicated because like, this is canon to the NieR story and the NieR universe. So it's the Kingdom Hearts conundrum. It's the Final Fantasy XIV raids as well for NieR are canon to the story, apparently, to the NieR story. So, we're getting a bit of a multiverse here. But yeah, NieR Reincarnation is, I don't know whereabouts it falls in the timeline because we don't really know where anything is. Like, there's a couple of thousand years between Replicant and Automata, so I don't know where this sits. But it's essentially a girl wakes up and she's trapped inside the cage, which is just this big towering structure, and she's guided by this little ghost called Mama to recover her memories and to break free of the cage. And all of these like little weapon stories and character stories are what she has to piece together in order to understand herself. And in like typical NieR fashion, this game looks gorgeous and sounds gorgeous and feels just like Automata and Replicant, I suppose. Even more so. Like, I think one of the things that really lends itself well to Reincarnation is like, it's kind of a shame it's a gacha game and it's got like an RPG combat system, because while I was playing it, I felt like this would work really well as like a sound novel or a visual novel. Like, I think that the ways it works the best are when the narrator is reading out the dialogue and when the music's just playing and when you get the odd like interactive bit where you like touch the screen to, I don't know, kill somebody, or you open a door for somebody, or you pick a flower or something, like any of those little things. Like, it felt like it lent itself more to that genre. So it was kind of annoying when I had to go into combat and be like, oh, I'll just sit here and tap the screen or let auto do all the work for me. And yeah, it's just got this really, I think if you're familiar with a NieR game, because I would not tell you to play this first, I would probably tell you to go and play Replicant first. Because now, the whole series is like readily available. If you've played a NieR game, like, you'll know right from starting up the title screen, from any of the visuals, it's totally a NieR game. Like, it's claustrophobic, it's uncomfortable, it's meditative, it's thoughtful, it's provoking, it's everything you'd expect a NieR game to be on a tiny little screen, right down to the way the words are written on the screen, to the character interactions, to the way, Mama is appropriately titled because she is extremely like saccharine, cloyingly sweet, like tells you how to do things, gives you tutorials and things like that. Like, everything feels very deliberate about it in a way that makes me feel very uncomfortable, and the way that NieR games are the only ways that make me feel that way. And the music is stunningly good, as Jono's already said. Like, NieR games always have really good music because Keiichi Okabe and his studio Monarca are brilliant. Like, just go and check out any of their work. Shino Alice has got a brilliant soundtrack. Any of the Tekken games that Okabe has composed for as well, brilliant. And the Smash Bros tracks he's contributed to as well. But like, here it's like really different in like, there's a lot more meditative music, there's a lot more like atmospheric music, and yeah, I think everything like works to the advantage of making it feel like a NieR game. I just hate playing it. I hate gacha games so much. This is the problem. Like, I want to do stuff. Like, if you're making me like play a game, which I think is why I'm like leaning on the visual novel stance, like, just make it more choice heavy. And I get it. Like, you know, NieR is an RPG series, and, you know, it's built around that foundation, and they're action RPGs. This is a turn-based RPG, so it's different in that respect, and I'm not sure how you'd get an action RPG to work on a gacha game. I'm sure someone's done it. But yeah, it's just boring. It's just the same stuff over and over and over again. You do one fight and then do another fight, and then you get more currency to spend on this thing, and you need another piece of currency to get another character or another weapon, or one of the events needs this type of currency. There's like 15 different types of currency, and any one event that you do or any one battle that you take part in will only give you one or two types of currency. Like when the game launched, there was an automata event, there were 2 different automata events, and you got a different type of currency from each of those, as well as like normal money. But then another event opened up like a week afterwards that had a 3rd type of currency. And then you've got currencies that you need to buy materials to upgrade characters, another one that upgrades weapons, another one that upgrades skills, another one that upgrades companions, another one that upgrades memories, and all these different things. And it's just like, it piles up and up and up and up. And like, this is the thing with gacha, right? You know, you want the best characters, you want their best skills. So all of these different currencies, you can either sit and grind for them for hours, and it's doable. Like, the main story is pretty good at giving you like your basic currency at a good rate. But all the other ones, you need to rerun the same missions over and over and over again. And like, I can put it on auto run and get it to do the combat for me while I'm making a cup of tea or like writing something, but it's not very engaging, and that's what really frustrates me. And like, some people don't mind that, but like, to me, like, even though Reincarnation's got this like really brilliantly beautiful atmosphere that I just cannot get enough of, like, it's draining when all I'm doing is walking from point A to point B, jumping into combat, walking again, jumping into another combat that feels exactly the same. And yeah, it's like the story isn't good enough. Like, it's still good. I think it's written really brilliantly, and again, it feels like NieR, but there's just not enough there. Like, the thing is with Reincarnation is like, again, the writing's really good, but the story's not finished, and it's not even finished in Japan. So we don't know how long it's going to go on for. And like, we've already had one big twist. And interestingly enough, Reincarnation's been out in Japan since February. So it's been out 6 months, 7 months nearly. They got it up to chapter 6 in February, and then they've gradually added, we're up to 11 at the time of recording, both in here. Japan have only just got chapter 12 a month ago. And we only just got the game a month ago. We went up to chapter 9 from launch day, but we've already had 2 new chapters in 3 weeks. We're almost up to date with Japan already. So they're pushing for it.
Oh, wow.
They're pushing for it, but it means there's so much going on at any one time that it's just like, it becomes mandatory. It's not like the mandatory, like, oh, I go on to Stardew Valley and I got to water my flowers today. Oh, I go on Animal Crossing. I want to read my mail today. Or I do my dailies on 14, something like that. It feels more like a chore. And like, I'm not getting any reward out of it apart from, oh, there's a pretty portrait of one of my favorite characters. Like, that's nice. But also, I've rolled 300 times and it's taken me so many times to get this one. Do I really feel like fulfilled or anything like that? So yeah, something in my review I said is like, I think if you like NieR, you'll get something out of it. Like, I still get something out of it because I'm just fascinated by the way that it seems to be. Like, it's almost a bit of a joke in the review. Like, I'm like, this is probably all deliberate. Yoko Taro's deliberately probably just like, you know, it feels like this game is extremely claustrophobic and extremely uncomfortable. And also it's just really overbearing in tone, but also just throwing stuff at me all the time. It's obviously deliberate because it's a Yoko Taro game. He wants me to be frustrated with the way it plays, but he wants it to mirror the tone of the game. And it's like, come on, but yeah, it's just, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's frustrating because like I knew I would come out feeling like this, and I felt the same way about Tales of Crestoria, which was another mobile game that I reviewed last year, I think. Like it just doesn't do enough for me. Like, I need something like gameplay wise, which is interesting because I'd put story above gameplay almost 95% of the time. But just leaving something on autoplay or just hitting the same buttons over and over again is like, it's nothing. And like the reward of getting character models to fight with that I have to then regrind to upgrade again, it's like, it's just not enough for me. Like, again, I think people like me will get something out of it, and I'll probably still chip away at it really slowly as I go, just because I'm interested in the atmosphere and the characters and things like that. But yeah, it's frustrating. I'm interested to see how it ties into everything, but gacha. Why is gacha so popular?
I completely understand, and it's a concern that I've had about a lot of like Square Enix has a lot of games coming out in Japan and they haven't been announced here, but like Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent or the new Bravely Default game, and there are gacha mechanics in both of those, and I'm looking at them like, I really want to play these, but I have an odd feeling that I would just scream in frustration that there's possibly a really good game here, but I can't play it the way I want to play it.
Yeah, it's burnout as well, isn't it? Because as I say, it just throws stuff at you and it's like an obligation rather than like something you want to play, right? Like, I don't want that out of anything.
Well, there's an argument to be made that gacha mechanics are specifically designed for shorter bursts, like you're on a commute or something like that. Not that really anybody is commuting anywhere nowadays, but what do you like? I'm assuming you played it at home. If you were to play it in a slightly different way, like let's say you had to take the subway somewhere every day for a couple of hours, do you think that you would enjoy it more then?
Maybe. I'm not sure. Like, that's a good point, actually, because it is broken up into chapters, and the chapters are only really like 20 minutes to half an hour long. So, like, if I was playing through the story, yeah, and maybe I'd, if I'm on the way back home from work or something, I'd whip out my phone and be like, oh, I can do like a couple of missions or something like that. But like, there's also like 20 other things I could do. Like, I could read a book, or I could listen to a podcast, or I could, I don't know, write something. There's so many different things. And like, yeah, it's a good point though, because say it is designed to be played in shorter bursts. You're right. And I think that's why the story is broken up the way that it is. But
because I'm 100% with you with gacha mechanics, I'm not a fan. But I feel like gacha mechanics are specifically designed for a commuter culture, like not a car commute, but like a commuter culture where you're on a train, you're on a bus, you're on a subway, and you have to get up and you kind of have to be paying attention at the same time to make sure you don't miss your stop, but it's going to be a while. I kind of feel like a lot of these games are designed for that sort of environment. And that's not how I play games, personally. I know it's not how you play games. I'm wondering if that's how some people play games and gacha mechanics work better with that.
Probably, yeah. I mean, the commuter culture in Japan is pretty big, isn't it? Like the bullet trains and the transport system over there is pretty damn good, and a lot of people use it. So, yeah. And I mean, they make money as well. It's just as simple as that. So that's probably why Square Enix keep churning them out. Like, I've heard some good things about Octopath, actually, but I'm still wary about it. And like, that's why I jumped on this. Like, I'm a huge NieR fan. I want to know what's going on, but like, it's just, it's still not enough. It's still not enough for me to go, yeah, this is a wholehearted yes recommendation. This is if you like NieR, you probably should at least watch some cutscenes, maybe. But we'll see where it goes, because obviously the story's not finished in Japan or here, so we don't know how long we've got to go. We don't know how long they're going to support it for. So,
out of curiosity, I mean, I think that a fairly cynical point of view about this is a lot of these companies, they'll release a gacha game with beautiful graphics and great music and theoretically fun to play. And then they'll milk it and milk it and milk it until there's nothing left. And then they will fix it, and they will basically do the equivalent of hooking it up to a car battery and take out all the gacha mechanics and then release it as like a $30 purchase. Then they're like, it's a full game. If they were to take out or alter the gacha mechanics in this game and release it as a standalone, full-priced game, do you think it would play better?
Take out the battle system. I'm pretty happy, to be honest. Like, I think that's the point that I was making, is like, I would just like it as a visual novel almost. Like, I'm invested in what's going on just enough to be able to sit through it. But yeah, it's the interruptions of the battles and that are just what I don't really enjoy about it. So yeah, I think that could work.
That's interesting. And that's, I mean, who knows? That might be the end game for this game. And I know it's been the end game for a lot of, like, Final Fantasy Dimensions 2 is not Final Fantasy Dimensions 2. It was a gacha Final Fantasy game that they stripped out all the gacha mechanics and they released it as a full title. And apparently it's pretty good. I haven't played it because I've heard it's not like Final Fantasy Dimensions, and I love Final Fantasy Dimensions. But Yeah, I hear what you're saying about visual novels and how the story might have been better for visual novels. As someone who adores visual novels, or at very least reviews like all of them, Audra, have you any
Yes.
interest in playing this game at all, or the NieR series in general?
I've been very curious about the NieR series. It's on my list to play one day along with Zelda. But I would be interested in a VN version of this. Definitely, if the storyline's interesting.
Alana, where should Audra? Where should she start? Should she start with
Replicant? Yeah, I think you could probably start with Replicant at this point. They're both available on PS4 now, so but like Replicant happens first, and Automata does spoil a few things from Replicant, so yeah, you can play it in that order, definitely.
All right, thank you.
So we're talking about we mentioned visual novels. Why don't we actually talk about a visual novel? So Audra, you played. There are two games that you've reviewed very recently. I really want to talk about the second one because it sounds super exciting, but I did want to mention the first one because it was a really cool review. And it looks like a really cool game. Can you tell us a little bit about Ambition: A Minuet in Power?
Oh, Ambition: A Minuet in Power is about a French woman who she's going to marry her nobleman fiancé. So she arrives in Paris at the beginning or close to the beginning of the French Revolution, only to find that he's up and left. So she's totally running a household on her own, that she has no idea what she's doing. And she has to make a livelihood through Paris, France, and the society circles and everything, and sell gossip to newspapers to keep herself afloat.
As one does.
All while basically having to avoid getting to the guillotine.
As one does.
Yes, as one does.
That's where the setting really comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it increases, the danger and intensity keeps increasing the more you play it, as things just kind of get progressively worse throughout the history of the time period.
See, I love that idea that, I don't know if you have a massive amount of knowledge about pre-revolutionary France, but the fact that they set it in this time period and it sounds like it's at least somewhat historically accurate in terms of the events is really, really cool. I think it sounds like they really put you in that place.
Yes, it's kind of similar. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Hakuoki from a Japanese history standpoint.
A little bit, yeah,
but
personally.
Yeah, they do enough of the actual historical events to try to have it have a feel of accuracy, which I quite liked.
Yeah, historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and aside from, it sounds like an incredibly ambitious visual novel, but it also sounds like, when a lot of people think visual novel, they kind of think, well, you just kind of click and occasionally you make a choice that determines your path. This sounds like it has a lot more mechanics than just that.
Oh, yes.
Like, as someone who has spent way too much time playing the Hostess Simulator in Yakuza 0, the fashion angle is actually quite interesting to me.
Yes, fashion plays a big part in it. You have to keep in mind the various factions at play in Paris and dress accordingly when you're going out to these social gatherings that you can accept invitations to. And it's very interesting, like you have to keep yourself clothed in new styles all the time and make sure that you're not upsetting anyone by wearing a certain thing to a certain gala or event.
See, I love that. I love the idea that you're not just navigating the world based on trying not to anger characters based on the choices that you make in dialogue, but you're even passive things like, well, like the clothes or the gossip that you share.
Yeah.
I like that idea that it's not just you're playing this game, but you're navigating this society.
Yeah, it's like a balancing act that you have to keep up in order to avoid basically getting a bad ending. A very bad ending.
Gee, what would that bad ending be? Just pre-revolutionary France, I cannot imagine.
Yep.
Well, I know that you gave this a pretty good score. You really enjoyed the game. It sounds really cool. It sounds like a great visual novel for people who like it. But the game that I really, really wanted to talk to you about is The Vale: Shadow of the Crown.
Yes.
Because this game sounds like it's not just... It's something very, very different than what we usually cover, or even what we generally think of as a role-playing game, while still fitting very firmly into that genre. Can you tell us a little bit about The Vale?
The Vale: Shadow of the Crown it's labeled as an audio RPG. So you play the role of Alex, who's a princess who happened to be born blind. So she was kind of overlooked by her father for a lot of years, and essentially she gets banished into the Outlands in the beginning of the story and has to fend for herself after a raid happens. And it's literally putting you in her shoes and her perspective. And so you're relying solely on sound. There's really not graphics to speak of. It's more just darkness with occasionally colored lights flailing about, but you have to actually still maneuver through the areas, and you fight things still. You visit towns, and you accept quests, and you do everything that you do in a fully fledged RPG, just without graphics, really.
Oh my God.
It's so cool. I want to jump in for just 1 sec on that one. Since I do the RPGs coming this week column, of course, and so that one came up obviously quite recently.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that I do, this is kind of, I've kind of gotten into a groove on how to write it, is I'll look for like a pretty good spiffy image for each game. And so, I'm looking at the page for this one, and I'm like, I can't seem to find one. What's going on here? And that's when I read, I started reading about it, and it just, the concept of it hooked me so much,
Yes, it opens, I don't want to say it opens the eyes of people who aren't maybe visually impaired to, but you really get the perspective of having to rely on sound and hearing for it. And it's made with visually impaired people in mind so that they can actually play a game, which
I
isn't...
love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's fully narrated, and even like the weapons, they'll give you audio stats on what they do and stuff when you want to increase your skills and everything.
Oh, that's cool. So all of the menus are also audio-based?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, everything's totally narrated.
See, I'm having trouble imagining this, simply because it's just not in my frame of reference. But that's one of the reasons I really, really want to play it, because I love the idea that there's this game that will specifically challenge my idea of I guess, the sensory input of a video game.
Mm-hmm.
And interactivity. Like, in my mind, the visuals are, even if they're terrible or low poly or like pixel based, they're always there. It's always been there. And the idea that even for a text adventure, you still have the text on the screen. But the idea that all of that is removed and the mechanics are still recognizable as RPG mechanics is really hard for me to imagine, and I really, really am intrigued by it.
I loved playing it. I thought it was such a great experience. Just everything about it was really polished and fine-tuned. It's definitely one that you'd want to play with a headset.
Right. Yeah.
It seems like ignoring the fact that obviously it's a very auditory experience.
Yeah, I had tried playing it just using my speakers on my computer before, and you really get a sense with the headsets of the directions of people footsteps are coming in, and which helps you target for attacks and stuff, and it was really unique.
Yeah, the Steam page even like specifically states, if at all possible, use a headset, try to use like the best one, that sort of thing. And it's tough not to see why. I mean, that's just, I think this game should be like shouted from rooftops on big sites. Is like,
yes,
yeah, especially because it's good. I mean, even if it
really
wasn't,
good.
But like, this is a revolution, I think.
I mean, I'd heard about it, and I almost assumed it was just going to be maybe kind of an audio visual novel type deal.
Yeah, that's what I thought too when I was looking at it, and I thought it's just going to be like a visual novel but audio based, but that's not what it is.
No, and I played it. It's a completely full-fledged RPG experience. You're just not, you happen to be playing, and you're playing her role, so you actually are seeing it from her perspective.
So what's combat like then anyway? Is it like, so they give you like options, and I don't know, actually. I don't even know. I can't even imagine what it would be like.
It's almost kind of an action RPG combat system. You listen for the sounds of footsteps and like wolves coming closer when they snarl at you and stuff. And depending on the direction that the sound is coming from, you can then target using the stick controllers.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And you can even later on, you get magic spells that you can actually use too, and you get a shield that you can block and parry with. I mean, it's a very complex system actually, but I found it easy enough to learn thanks to the tutorials they set up.
Oh wow, yeah.
As a comic book nerd, you're telling me all this, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, it would be awesome if someone released like a Daredevil RPG using this kind of mechanics.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, ignoring the fact that obviously it's very audio based and you need to be able to hear the sounds around you. What's the quality of the sound like? Like, how's the voice acting? How's the music?
Oh, the voice acting is incredible. I loved all of the characters, especially Alex was an emotive heroine. She was just great throughout the whole thing. Her uncle, who you hear in flashbacks a lot of the time, is perfectly voiced, and just you get the sense from him that he's like the strict but loving uncle and who looked out for her when her father didn't and stuff. And probably one of the best characters voiced is he's known only as Shepherd, and he has like a great accent because he's from the Outlands, and it's just the way they have him and Alex's dialogue together, it was really phenomenally done. He kind of serves more as like her guide throughout as she's trying to traverse the Vale, and so it's like they play off each other really well, and just the voice acting was absolutely phenomenal. Even the narrator woman she had a great tone to her and very clear and concise. Music was a bit more subtle. I think they wanted to avoid having it overwhelm the sound effects.
That makes full amount of sense, especially if it's the only thing you're relying on for your input is the sounds around you.
Yeah. So they had it in a few scenes, and it was very nice, very low-key, but soft and fitting for the tone at the time. But they relied a lot on just the overall sound effects to build the atmosphere, and they used a lot of descriptive wording to describe just how the world was set up and what the people looked like. I mean, it really paints a picture even when there are no images to be seen.
Right, and I think sound design, like even outside of like something where you need really good sound design, it's really underappreciated anyway. So when you're like forced to pay attention to things like that, it really draws out just how important it should be for everybody. Like, it's funny because like there's not many. I can't think of another game that even implements anything similar. Like maybe with sound effects, absolutely. Like you need to hear like footsteps going off on like horror games and things like that, but like not in the sense of like narration that actually tells you like what you can choose between or like when you need so good. And I think like we were saying, like websites should like shout off the rooftops from it, absolutely, but like I think developers should also take note, because like this is the first time I've ever really seen anything like this. Is the whole game like successfully anyway?
Definitely there was a lot of thought and effort put into it, and it really shows.
Yeah, that's the thing that's really striking to me, is that this kind of thing could easily have been an experiment where it's a short demo or a short game or a proof of concept, but it really sounds like you gave it a 93, so you obviously loved it.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so they didn't just make a demo, they made a game. They made an RPG without visuals, and that's crazy amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I just loved even doing just the quests, walking around. Like there's one where you have to find beehives at a certain point, following just the sound of the bees. But you have to do it in a quick way because it turns out Shepherd's allergic to bees.
Oh no.
There's a real visceral like sound of bees flying around, just the thousands of them. And I imagine that it would create a visceral reaction in a game like this, or like the sound of wolves growling at you.
Yes, the wolves were very unsettling, especially towards the end when they became kind of demonic wolves.
I mean, dark rooms in video games are designed for like jump scares a lot of the time or things like that. But in this particular case, it's not a jump scare. It's just the world that she is living in, that Alex is living in. And as a result of that, I don't imagine that it sounds like she's very empowered in the game. It doesn't sound like it's like a helpless thing. It sounds like she becomes, quite a bad actually.
She is. She's very bad, which I quite liked.
Yeah. Well, it's a kind of game that I actually would like to take a look at, and I might just do that because like I said, I'm in New Glasgow right now, and my graphics card is in Toronto. So I can't really run any graphically intensive games right now, but this doesn't sound graphically intensive. This sounds like it might be just right.
Oh, yep.
And I might just give it a shot.
I definitely would recommend trying it out if you just want something different.
And I do. So this sounds amazing. Does anyone have any other thoughts about the Vale?
Only that I need to pick it up.
Yeah, absolutely. That alone, really. And the fact, I think empowering is a really good way of putting it, because, like, you know, they could have done it and it could have been gimmicky. I mean, like, I hate to bring up a game called The Quiet Man, if anyone remembers that.
Yeah, that was incredibly unfortunate.
Yeah, like that tried to use sound, didn't it? And it just ended up being awful and also a little bit offensive.
Yeah.
And like, this is like absolutely, like, first and foremost, like, use the mechanics really well, but also, like, you want to empower the character or the person playing it, really. You know, if you can play a video game based on sound cues alone, that's something really special, isn't it? So yeah, I'm gonna pick this up, I think. I mean, Audrey, you've completely sold me on it. Like, I saw it on coming this week and was like, ooh. And then I saw Audra's review today and was like, oh my God, okay, I need to pick this up. So
same.
Awesome.
It sounds amazing. And I think that it will be a memorable experience. I want to keep going now and move on to the discussion question, but I just wanted to mention real quick that I've talked about Dreamscaper on the podcast before, because I did the preview for the E3 presentation, and I wrote a review for it, and it's out now. I love it. I just love it. Roguelike games have never really hit me in the right way. This one does, and I think the reason why is because it's very grounded. The reason why it's a roguelike, like the central conceit, is it's in your dreams every night. So every night you fall asleep, every night you wake up from your nightmare. And that's the reason why your progress gets reset. And it's basically, it's you trying to get as deep into your dreams as possible and face your traumas in the dreams. And as you face your trauma in these dreams, you unlock new ideas, new experiences, and that affects your life in the real world, where you are feeling very socially isolated. You can make friends. You have to build up your relationships, and those relationships build up your abilities in the dreams. As someone who, among many people, have mental health issues, it felt very empowering to play this game. I loved it. I just thought it's a beautiful, beautiful game too. Extraordinarily unique visual style. So yeah, if you're looking for a good roguelike, if you loved Hades and you're like, I want some more roguelike, Dreamscaper is a very underrated place, I think, to get your roguelike fix. And it's an RPG too, so I highly recommend it. If you want more, it's in my review, but just wanted to mention it.
I haven't played too many roguelikes, so I might give it a shot.
definitely.
It's pretty great, and it's a small team. I talked to them. I talked to them briefly on the quote-unquote show floor for E3, and they seem like really, really nice people. Super passionate about this game. It's been in early access for about a year now, and from what I've seen and from what they said, it really looks like they made the most of that time. The game is absolutely packed full of content. It's not a quick, you're not going to breeze through it, and it's really, really hard in places. Obviously, it gets easier as you get some more abilities, but yeah, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of like the mental health aspect of it, because like I'm one of the people who did get hooked on Hades last year, and interestingly enough, like Hades was also in early access for about a year, and it's nice to see like these two like roguelites, whatever you want to call them, like do that development period, take on the feedback, and then come out and be like a rip-roaring success, basically. Because like I've seen like really positive buzz for Dreamscaper like everywhere, and
me too.
Yeah, I'm really, really interested in it, especially given that it does tackle things like insomnia and mental health in ways that not only are just narratively, but also like take on like the roguelike elements, like the randomness and like how it impacts every day differently, things like that. So I think it could be a really interesting way to see it. Oh yeah. So your review again, like I saw your thoughts on E3 and I saw your review and was like, yeah, this is just the roguelike genre also never really gripped me until Hades, and now I want to play every single roguelike that ever came out. So it's like, yeah, especially if it's got like an interesting twist to it, and that's Dreamscaper's like visual style alone, and the music completely.
The music is gorgeous.
Yeah, Del North is brilliant. So
yeah, Adam wrote a review for the music. I think I'll include it in the show notes. And I think the soundtrack is now available for purchase, and I'm pretty sure it's available for streaming as well.
Ooh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's some good study music, just some nice relaxing tunes. I'm a big fan. The whole package, I think the game just rocks. I think it's great. I really wish this team all the best with this game and with anything they create in the future. So let's move on to our semi-weekly discussion question. And this time, I'm not going to provide it. This week, we have gotten some fan mail. Greg is going to be very, very jealous because he always asks for fan mail, and the fan mail comes in while I'm hosting. So, sorry, Greg. Yeah. Here, I'm just going to read the message for you. It's from Mission Failed. Their name is Mission Failed on Twitter. Hi, Jono. Just wanted to reach out and say congrats. You did a fantastic job hosting your first episode of Random. If you're after a quick topic for an episode, I'd be interested to know what the first RPG everyone remembers playing, and which was the first RPG that you ever rolled credits on. The first I remember was playing Wonder Boy in the Monster World on the Master System, barely an RPG, and the first I beat was Chrono Trigger. Thanks again for the great podcast. Keep up the good work. Thank you very, very much for the question. FYI, for anyone out there, Mission Failed does stream, so you can check them out at Mission Failed YT on Twitch. And I think it's a really good question. 2 questions, technically. So, which is the first RPG everyone remembers playing, and which is the first RPG that you ever rolled credits on? I'll go first because I just sprung it on everyone, and I want to give you some time to think. My answer is the same for both of them, really. It's Final Fantasy IV/2. I remember, I've told this story before. I remember renting it from Abercrombie Video. It was... Oh, that's another thing. I'm in New Glasgow, so I think I'm going to just include a photo from Abercrombie Video in the show notes, just so everyone can actually know what it looks like, because I keep talking about the bloody place.
The graphic.
Yeah. Final Fantasy IV was the first one. I picked it up. I didn't know what an RPG was. There were a bunch of save files. I just grabbed the first one, and it loaded me up in the final dungeon. And I had no idea what I was doing. I was in the final dungeon. And I just kind of like wandered through and was trying to figure out what goes on. Eventually I figured out, I can start a new game. And then I started a new game, and I instantly fell in love with the idea that this was a video game that I could read, because I was very, very much into books. I loved reading. It was my passion when I was a child. And all of a sudden it was like, words in a video game. That's madness. And that's what started my lifelong love of role-playing games. And yeah, I played it through. I kept renting it until eventually my parents decided that it would be it'd be smarter just to buy it because it would cost less money. And I got to the credits. It took me forever to beat the last boss in that game. I could never beat the last boss. It must have taken me like a month of trying to fight him. Nowadays, if I start it up, I can beat him like every single time. But back then I was a kid. I didn't know what cure was.
Ceramus can be a pain anyway, but yeah.
Big Bang is a
Yep.
So yeah, that was mine. What about everyone here? What was your first RPG you ever played, and first RPG you ever rolled credits on?
Oh, mine was it something Final Fantasy Saga or Final Fantasy Legend?
I think it would be Legend. It was a Saga game, but it was named Final Fantasy Legend.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was
You have played a Saga game.
I have.
Revelation time.
I don't remember it too well, but it was on my cousin's Game Boy, and I just picked it up out of curiosity and kind of thought it was interesting, but then kind of put it down and lost interest, as kids want to do.
No, I do that when I play a Saga game too.
Oh,
this looks interesting. I'm going to put this down now.
And then,
first of all, rude.
We're used to it.
And then years later, I finished Final Fantasy VII. Was my first.
That's a good first rolling credits game. I think a lot of people feel that way about it. That's the first RPG they ever beat.
Yeah, it was probably my first real RPG experience that I remember more than just vaguely.
I'll go next. And this is actually, I have to work backwards here from the first one I beat to the first one I played. And there's a reason for that. The first one that I beat was also Final Fantasy VII. I had the same reaction that you did, the words in a video game. I love books. What is happening here? I borrowed my friend's copy of the game and the strategy guide. And I remember not really spoiling myself, but kind of peering ahead to see how long the game was. And I got to Shinra HQ, and I was like, the game isn't over yet. This is crazy. So needless to say, there were another 90 pages or whatever. Absolutely love it. Typical story there. I used to cite it for the longest time as the first RPG I played. And I was always first RPG I played was one of my favorites. I love FF7. It wasn't until 8 or 9 years ago that I realized I'd been telling people, including myself, a lie like my whole gaming life. The first RPG I played was
everything you do is a lie.
Yes. I saw this game kind of like, looking at lists and stuff, and it was the first video game I ever played. I was like 4, and I was like, wait, that was an RPG. OMG. It's Sword of Vermilion for the Sega Genesis. And yeah. I had a Genesis to play because my uncle was like living with my grandmother and my mother. We were all living together when I was a kid, and I just looked at it, and it was like, hey, I like swords, I like sorcery, I don't know what's going on. I had no idea that it was like this kind of important game. It was like produced by Yu Suzuki, from like Shenmue fame and Virtua Fighter. Hiroshi Kawaguchi, who's done a lot of like Sega soundtracks, was on that. At the time, I was horrible at it. I never got very far, but reading up on it, like it filled me with this gush of memories I'd completely forgotten. It's an interesting game. It has like 4 different views and play styles. So the town view uses the typical like overhead angle found in most RPGs, but then there's a battle view, which is tilted overhead view. The player takes like full control of the character in real-time combat. This is where I kept dying. The player can use weapons and magic. I was just mashing buttons. I mean, the other game I was playing was Sonic the Hedgehog. I understood go right from left, And then dungeon view, this is where I kept getting confused. It's a first-person perspective, so it's like Phantasy Star. And my goodness, everything looks the same. And also, when you get into battles in the dungeon view, it's just like a hack and slash. It's not the same thing as battles in the more RPG sense. And then finally, there's a boss view, which puts the player up against a boss from a sideways viewpoint. So suddenly you're playing like Adventure of Link, kind of. I mean, it's trying to be so many different things. And it completely overwhelmed me. And I used to just eat oatmeal and play the very first town and talk to people and then give up. I don't know, like so many times. But I want to play it again, and it really crushed me. I almost got the Sega Mini, but it was one of the games that only got released on the Japanese one and got replaced by something here. And I was like, no, there is at least one person in the Western Hemisphere who cares.
It's funny you say that, because as soon as you started talking about the game, I went to Google and typed in Sword of Vermilion RPG, and the first thing that came up was our site. And then I was like, oh, that's not really useful. And then I went a few down. I was like, here's a post from Reset Era. Has anyone here played Sword of Vermilion?
Was it by me?
Yeah, I'm like, I have a strange history with this game. When I was about 4 years old, I inherited this. This story sounds familiar.
Amazing.
And then I look and I'm like,
oh my.
Moderator, Quinton.
I'm like I'm truly a testament to this game. Oh my gosh. Wow. I better do something about this. I need to call up Yu Suzuki or something.
Oh, God.
I'm like, hey, I'm one of the first Google results, speaking from a position of authority here.
Hey, I would call, if I was you, I'd call up Solosi and just be like, hey, I have a pitch for a retro episode.
Yes.
There you go.
Because we do not have an episode about this game, and it could be interesting. So that's not a promise, by the way. Solosi has what you could only describe as a massive backlog of retro games that we need to get through, but that seems like it should be added to the list.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. So, Alana, what about you?
So I've got one. This will date me as the baby, so I'm very sorry, everybody. But I've got the same answer for both, although I have like a separate answer. So this is like the first RPG I played and beat, but played it with somebody else. So me and my brother emulated Pokemon Yellow before it came out in Europe. That was the very first RPG I ever played, and interestingly enough, I just had a really fun time with it. It taught me a lot. Like, you were talking about text and things like that, and I think like Pokemon is one of those series that taught me words that I didn't know at like 5 years old, like astonish and things like that. So I was just interested.
Tall grass.
Yeah, tall grass. I mean, I'm a small
Never
person. I'm not that small, but like most grass is tall grass to me. But yeah, like it was just I mean, Pokemon is a really great star RPG anyway, and like it's one of those series I'd probably recommend. And like if I ever had kids, it would be one of the first things I would ever get them to play. Absolutely. Also because things are cute in it. But yeah, that was me and my brother played that through. He'd played a few RPGs because I'd watched him play things like Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII. I'd seen him play Zelda games. But probably the first RPG I beat on my own is Final Fantasy IX.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just There's nothing really special to say about either of them other than like they were just pretty formative. Like Pokemon was one of my favorite series for a long time. Final Fantasy IX is my favorite Final Fantasy. So yeah, they both just really stuck with me and got me hooked on the genre.
Well, I think those are all outstanding answers. And actually, because of them, now I know you a little bit better. And so do our listeners. So that is the epitome of a good question. If anyone listening has any questions they want to ask, just fire. I'll have my contact information at the end of the episode. Fire me or Greg off a question, and we'll address it on the show. Speaking of just things, so we're at the end of the episode now, but there's a little bit of housekeeping that I want to do. The first is as an announcement about Random Encounter, and that is that we are moving. So we usually post our episodes bi-weekly on a Friday or a Saturday, but we're going to be moving that to Mondays from this point on. And we're going to be doing that because Rhythm Encounter posts bi-weekly on Mondays. So we're going to be alternating with them. So what's going to happen is you're always going to have 2 podcasts from RPG Fan every week. You're going to have a Rhythm Encounter and a Retro Encounter at the end of the week. And then you're going to have a Random Encounter and a Retro Encounter at the end of the week.
Ooh.
So that we're getting on a schedule. So it's going to be bi-weekly from now on, 2 podcasts a week from RPG Fan. We're going to be starting, this is fun, I'm going to have to record an extra episode next week because to do so, to get on this schedule, I need to post an episode on September 6th. So it's going to be posted a little bit early. So just keep a heads up about that. Speaking of Random Encounter, we have a massive backlog of episodes for you can discover. They make for just great things to listen to on your non-existent commute. If you don't want to play a gacha game, listen to a Random Encounter.
Agreed.
A couple of days ago, because I was hosting, I thought, I think I'm going to brush up on my Random Encounter history. So I downloaded a few old episodes, and I downloaded one called Too Much Dragon Quest from October 20th, 2016, and it started with Rob Steinman introducing everyone on the episode, and I genuinely did a full-out spit take when he said, Caitlin is here, so that probably means we're going to talk about Final Fantasy XIV.
That's about right.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think from this point on, that's how I'm going to introduce Caitlin every single time she shows up on the episode, with those exact words. Caitlin is here, so that means we're probably going to talk about Final Fantasy XIV. But Random's not the only RPG-focused podcast we have, because we are RPG Fan. We also have our weekly podcast focusing on all things Retro Encounter. It's hosted by Mr. Mike Solosi, the tireless Mr. Mike Solosi. And we have some great episodes of that in the backlog as well. I'm going to be showing up on one in a few weeks. I'm not going to spoil it. Rhythm Encounter is back. And I am delighted to announce that I'm also going to be hosting the next episode. It should be out next week. The topic is going to be Ace Attorney music. Ooh. And I had an absolute blast talking about the music of Ace Attorney because I love the series and I love the music. And the folks on the podcast with me were just wonderful. And I just finished editing the episode after that. And it is featuring the music of NieR, which, as you've heard, is absolutely phenomenal, and it includes Alana, so be sure to listen for that episode.
Please do. It was a great one to record, actually. There's a lot of things were discussed, so yeah.
Yes, there is much silliness in the episode too, so and Alana is in the heart of much of the silliness, as Alana can be.
As she tends to be, yes.
As she tends to be, yes. And I don't want to forget about our partner podcast, Phoenix Edge with Hat and Eric. They go the extra mile every week, or the extra kilometer for Alana and I, and that they keep everyone in the loop about all the RPG news coming down the pipe. And I suspect that there's going to be quite a bit of it because Gamescom is coming up from August 25th to 27th, so there's going to be a ton of RPG news, I suspect. There always is. And because we're doing the episode a week early, we'll probably look at some of that news in our thing. So we're gonna steal the news hat for a little bit and talk about some of the news. If you'd like to get in contact with me, you can find me at Jono Logan on Twitter, or you can send us your questions, your love, your criticism, anything you want to podcast@rpgfan.com. And we also have some guests on the podcast. So why don't we tell us, Alana, where can we find you online?
So best place is probably Twitter. I am at Alana Hagues on there. Or if you're part of the RPG Fan Discord, I am Alana on there. So just come hit me up.
Cool. Audra, where can we find you?
My email's probably the best bet. It's audrab@rpgfan.com.
And Quinton, can you tell us where we can find you?
Sure, yeah. You can find me on Twitter at Quinton Writes, because I'm Quinton and I write, and it's been a little while since I made that terrible joke. on a podcast. So here we are again.
Hello, old joke.
Yeah. That's my primary venue. If you'd rather shoot me an email, I'm Quinton and then the letter C at rpgfan.com. It's a little bit of a niche web domain, but I secured a spot on there. And yeah, one or the other. I'm out there.
Yep, and they will get back to you as long as they're not lost in the woods.
Yes, don't do that. By the way, it wasn't as fun as it sounds.
And yeah, so that's all from us this week. We'll be back in, I guess, a week and a half with a new episode on Monday. Remember, it's going to be on Mondays, alternating Mondays from this point on. So thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again in a week and a half. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.